I'm going to introduce our speaker shortly and make a couple of announcements. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your support of the Press Club. Because of your support for the Press Club, we are able this year to offer scholarships to prospective reporters, which our society needs badly. This year, we are going to award a $1,000 scholarship to a student at the LSU Manship School, and we are going to award a $1,000 scholarship to a student in the journalism program at Southern University. So thank you all. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. We make a little bit of money off these lunches. We make a little bit of money off membership. So that's why we're able to do this year. I also want to talk about our upcoming speakers before we get started. Let's see if I can get them lined up here. We are not meeting next week because of the start of the legislative session. Let's see, and so that's March 9th. The legislative session starts next Monday. The week after that, our speaker is Ann Rolfs, who is Executive Director of the Louisiana Bucket Brigade. The week after that, our speaker is Devontae Lewis, Public Service Commissioner. After that, our speaker is Logan Burke, who is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Affordable Energy. After that, our speaker on April 6th is Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. And the last speaker we have lined up so far for the spring is Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrow on April 13th. So please come back and support the Press Club and listen to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you everybody for being here. We're going to get started just a couple of minutes early today. And just again, want to remind everyone to please silence your cell phones and devices so that we can hear very clearly. My name's Elise File. I'm on the board of the Baton Rouge Press Club. I'm also a state politics and government reporter for the Advocate here in Baton Rouge. And I'm really excited today to be able to introduce our two speakers, House Speaker Phillip DeVillier and Senate President Cameron Henry. And we're very lucky to have them as our guests today. They're going to talk about the 2026 legislative session, which is set to start on Monday, March 9th, a week from today. And so just a brief background, House Speaker Phillip DeVillier was first elected to the House in 2015. He was elected Speaker in 2024. So this is his third and final term in that chamber. He lives in Eunice. And Senate President Cameron Henry, he's serving in his second term in the Louisiana Senate. He was elected president in 2024. He previously served 3 terms in the House, and he lives in Metairie. So the way we're going to do this today is we're going to hear from each of our speakers individually, and then after we hear from each of our speakers individually for about 10-ish minutes or so, then we'll open up the floor to questions, and so questions will be able to be directed to either of them or both of them during the Q&A portion. So could you all please help me welcome our first speaker, Phillip DeVillier.
All right, so good afternoon. Good afternoon. Great job. I'm really a little bit nervous right now because I was told that the Senate President's coming after me. And I just want y'all to know he tries to take credit for cleaning up all the housework, afterwards. So we're going to give him a hard time. I'm looking around. I know we have a lot of people from the press, and I like to try to think about what God's trying to tell me every morning. And in my gospel this morning, it said, Jesus said to his disciples, and they close, hold on. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. So I'm going to ask you to please try to be merciful on me today in what you report. But in all honesty, you know, the first call I got this morning, I was leaving my house and my neighbor was walking up and down her driveway, which she does every day. And she called and I was on the phone already. I had called someone right when I left. It was actually Chairman Boyer. And when I got done with the call with Chairman Boyer, I called my neighbor back. And she said, Philip, I want to let you know we just bought a house in Florida. And it really, like, I didn't even know what to say. It just really hurt knowing someone that I literally grew up across the street from, because I live on the same property where I was born and raised, and my neighbor's been there pretty much the whole time, that her and her husband are leaving to move to Florida. And anyway, I said, look, if y'all need something from me, let me know. If I hear of someone that's interested in buying your home, I'll certainly, you know, push them your way. We talked a little about realtors and things of that nature, and then we hung up, and then I just started thinking, why? Like, why are these great people leaving our state? And the answer to me was clear as could be. It's because her daughter had left several years ago to look for an opportunity in Florida. And that's just something that made me reflect on why I ran for office, because I can remember some 11 or 12 years ago looking around my children and talking with my wife, saying all of our friends that we went to high school and college have now moved on to other states and looked for opportunities somewhere else, and they're just not living in Louisiana anymore. So at that time I decided, why don't I run and try to make a difference? I ran. I can still remember when the Senate President came meet me during that time, and he gave me a lot of words of encouragement. He's been a dear friend to me the entire time I've been involved in the legislature. So I can't tell you how great it is working with my Senate President, Cameron Henry. But anyway, so I ran, I get elected, and the first 4 years in office, we really didn't do a whole lot to change the structure of our state. It was difficult, to say the least. My second term in office, of course, we all can remember COVID, how difficult that was. And I can think back and remembering how I've spent 8 years in Baton Rouge, and we haven't done a whole lot, I felt like. I know we grew government, taxes were raised, we didn't restructure a whole lot, and it was very frustrating. And then people started asking me to run for speaker, and I prayed on that, and I spoke to my wife and my children and my business partners, and here I am. And I guess we're at the midway point now on my first 2 years of being the speaker, and it's pretty incredible looking back and reflecting on that and thinking, you know, in 2016 when I was elected, we had 3 different personal income tax rates. I think there were 2%, 4%, and 6%. We had 5 different corporate tax rates, a 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, and 8%. We had a franchise tax, a corporate income tax, inventory tax. Our business rankings were about 42nd in the nation. Our education rankings were 49th in 2019. We weren't putting a whole lot of money, it felt like, on infrastructure. Our insurance rates, I mean, all of these things were just really, really difficult in 2016, all the way up until 2024. And looking at what we've done in just 2 years, we've really going after the problems that we have with crime, and we're starting to see the crime rates go down by around 11%. At least I see that some of you are reporting on that. When you look at our education rankings, again, we were 49th in 2019, we were 42nd in 2022, and in 2025, we're seeing now that we're 32nd in the nation when it comes to our education rankings. That's something I think we should all be proud of. When we see our teachers, we should thank them. When we see our superintendent, Kate Brumley, we should thank him for their work, and of course, the work that we've done in the legislature to move Louisiana forward. When you think about our tax policy and our business rankings, again, in 2016, 42nd in the nation. Today, if you look at the business outlook of Louisiana, we're around 15th on the business outlook in our country. And again, we had 3 different personal income tax rates. The highest was at 6% in 2016. Today we have one flat rate at 3%. So everyone that pays an income tax will see a reduction in their income taxes. And on the corporate side, again, in 2016 we had 5 different rates. Today we have one flat rate at 5.5%. This will be the first year we will not be paying a franchise tax, which is great. I mean, why would you want to tax businesses on their assets? And then we also have a constitutional amendment that's going to be in front of us very soon that lays out a path to get rid of the inventory tax. This is phenomenal. I mean, it's great to talk about. When I look at my notes from 2016 on what I wanted in a 5-year projection, and then again what I wanted in a 10-year projection, I don't have anything left in my notes section because we've surpassed all of those things, and it's incredible. And I've traveled around the state of Louisiana quite a bit. We have 105 members in the House. I've probably been to every single one of those members' districts, and I've spent time with them listening to their constituents, hearing and listening to what their concerns are. A lot of times we hear about insurance. People complain a lot about where we are in our insurance market. And they'll say we need to fix insurance. And they put it together. When you think about insurance, you have a lot of different things to consider, whether it's flood insurance, God bless you, property insurance, health insurance, workers' comp insurance, vehicle insurance, property. I mean, you can go on and think about all of the problems that we have with insurance. And in 2024, we brought, I think, around 15 bills when it comes to property insurance, and today we're seeing several new companies come to Louisiana. I think the best thing that we can do and continue to move when it comes to property insurance is push really hard on the fortified roof program. For the last 2 years, we put around $15 million into that program, and this year will be one of the first years it stands up on its own, and it'll be more than doubled. It'll have over $30 million as it stands today going to the fortified roof program. When it comes to auto insurance, we've passed probably around 30 bills on auto insurance. So collectively, we've passed around 51 insurance reform bills. And what you're seeing today, and it's just being reported, is that there's probably around 20 plus insurance companies that are all filing for rate reductions on the on the auto insurance front. And that's really great, but what's really important and something that you should know is that a lot of those bills didn't even go into effect until January. So those bills that we passed most recently over the last couple of years, we're seeing them already begin to work. And you could also see the problems that we have when it comes to our infrastructure. We have around a $19 billion backlog when it comes to roads and bridges. The Senate President and I, along with the legislature and our governor, we have worked really hand in hand to put hundreds of millions and actually close to $2 billion on roads and bridges over the last couple of years. And we're seeing that, I would say, develop right before our eyes. We put $100 million just on 62 bridges, and then we tasked the agency to complete these bridges in 15 months. And we're seeing groundbreaking after groundbreaking today on these roads and these bridges. So it's exciting to see. We do have a lot of work ahead of us, and I share all of that with you because I know you want to know, well, what's coming this coming session. And this is the 3rd year of this term. I think we have close to 1,000 bills filed on the House. I think there's around 400 filed in the Senate. I haven't gotten an actual number on where they are yet. But I'm not real sure on what the plans are as far as moving forward with legislation right now. I know we have a lot of conversation around carbon capture, something that a lot of people have some concerns with, and I certainly have an open door to listen to those concerns. When you think about all the things we've done over 2 years, with that work that we've done, we've attracted today over $100 billion of new investments across our state. $100 billion. And when you look at what these industries are providing, Louisiana is basically, in my opinion, the hub of becoming a global industry. And for years, America has been an importer of things. And what we're seeing right before our eyes today is we're now going to become an exporter. And for us to be able to compete globally, we have to embrace the policies today that help the businesses here grow and the ones that are coming succeed. And a lot of that is based around power. And I know our Senate President has worked hard on studying power, so I'm anxious to visit with him on that. Water, how it affects our water systems, how the needs that they have when it comes to workforce development, how are we going to address that? And of course, a lot of them have carbon capture and that in their resume. So, thinking back on what my neighbor's call this morning was and her leaving to go to Florida, I really think Louisiana's seeing a new day today. And hopefully we're going to attract our children that we educate here in Louisiana to keep them here and provide those an opportunity to stay in Louisiana, because we all know whenever our children and our grandchildren leave, quite often we follow them to where they go. So this is one of the first years that we've seen, I would say, an increase in population. over the last decade, we've seen a reduction of population across Louisiana. And I've seen, I think through Committee of 100, they've reported somewhere around a 10,000 individual increase in Louisiana's population. So that's what I have right now. I'm anxious to hear what our Senate President has to say. One thing that I'll say that I really enjoy is I enjoy working with Cameron. He's been a dear friend of mine for, I would say, 12 to 13 years. I've learned a lot from him. He doesn't get real excited. He stays calm and collect, and he's someone that I've learned a lot from and I consider to be a close friend. So thank you all for having me today, and I guess Cameron, Henry.
Okay, I apologize if my voice is a little raspy. I have what they call the Mardi Gras flu, so I apologize for that. So what I'll do is I'll, kind of Philip went over what we've done. I'll kind of address on what I plan on doing for this session, and I believe after that I'll invite Philip back up here and we'll take some questions. Philip, the Speaker was correct. The Senate filed about 400 bills this session. I think when you go look at them, you see a significant number of bills dealing with the judicial system in Orleans Parish. And at first glance, many of you are going to say, well, that seems like a local bill that would be resolved within the local community of Orleans Parish. But what you have to remember is the state pays for a lot of the court costs, the court systems in Orleans Parish, and that's the only parish that we do that in. So that's kind of opened the door to have some members look at making sure that the money that's being sent down there is being spent wisely to go through that process. I think that's one group. You'll have, of course, carbon capture bills, which is a hot topic and will continue to be a hot topic. It is something that is required for industry coming to Louisiana. Louisiana has to come to grips with that, find a happy medium to it. But a lot of the new industry that we're trying to attract to Louisiana, carbon capture is a part of that. And if the parishes that see those industries coming to them and decide, you know what, we don't want that type of industry here, that's a decision that they will have to make. And I can appreciate that decision. But in the same sense, those parishes can't come to the state and say, look, we need money for roads and bridges because we don't have any economic engine. Well, you just chased one away. So you have to figure out what your goals are and make sure that your local governing body understands what those goals are and the resources that you have, what other industry needs. I think you need to address that kind of more on a local level, but appreciate that some of these things that are coming out, specifically carbon capture, are required. So I think we're going to have to work pretty diligently on that. I would imagine there'll be several bills filed in the House. I know there's a couple bills filed in the Senate. So we'll see if we can work through those in a respectful manner. The budget will always be an issue to me. The governor, as the Speaker and I do, want to try to keep that budget at standstill at best. Our goal will always be to continue lowering taxes. And I think if we can be disciplined this session, next year's session, we might be able to lower income tax by another maybe half a point, which would cost about $500 million, about $500 million. And as many of you all know, the sales tax rolls from 5% to 4.75 in 2030. So we have to be cognizant of that as well. Those things you can't adjust on the fly. You really have to plan 3 or 4 years out to make sure that we'll actually be able to lower that sales tax, excuse me, as we've promised our constituents we would do. Trying to think of the other bills that have really come forward. Obviously, there's been a whole bunch of discussion related to the Gator program. We'll see how that develops through the legislative session. The governor's idea was to double the program. He and I spoke last week on it. We don't really have a huge disagreement on it. I think he understands my point. I understand his point. Obviously, doubling a program every year is going to be a problem for us financially because at some point in time, you have to figure out when you're going to stop doubling it. That's number one. More importantly, it's only existed for a year. And very rarely does a program start in Baton Rouge that we double 1 year in. I think it's important for us to take a step back and see whether it's actually working, right? Are the students that are going in, are they working? Does it work for those students? Does it work for the voucher? The majority of the kids are in the voucher program, which was a program that was pushed by the same people that are pushing Gator, right? And that program was supposed to work. It didn't. We adjusted. So let's wait a year or two, see if this program works, and then we can move forward with stats that show it's actually working. I don't think that's a far-fetched option for us to take right now. I'm trying to figure out what are the really big hot topic issues we have. I'm sure we'll cover a lot during the discussion. Obviously, you all have seen the enormous, just so you all know, in case any of y'all haven't been to the Capitol recently, give yourself about 15 extra minutes no matter where you're going to go, because parking is a new level of nightmare. okay? And getting into the building is a new level of nightmare. So please, give yourself 15 or 20 minutes to get into the building. This should take about another, 3 to 5 years to finish. So just come up with a better system than what you used to have, because it's going to be unique working through the Capitol right now. The speaker did discuss a task force that I put together dealing with power, and that was really driven by the enormous amount of power that is taken to run the data centers. And we appreciate Meta, and I believe it's Amazon is the new one that's up in Shreveport. But they're going to consume an enormous amount of power and water. These are resources that we don't have a lot of here in Louisiana, and we want to make sure that we can attract those businesses plus other businesses as well. And what we've kind of discovered through the first part of the task force, and the task force is going to continue to where we can just learn about the power industry. What I've learned through the process, and I don't know whether many of you all knew this or not, but when a power company makes an upgrade to something, to the grid, or whatever it might be, even to Meta, they're allowed to pass those expenses on to the consumers. That's us, right? So when they build something new for someone new, the consumers pay the cost of that. They're also allowed to tack on a 10% return, up to a 10% return on that investment. So if you think about it just for a second, they get a 10% return on investing your money. You don't. Now, I don't fault Energy, Clico, Trepco for doing this. It's what the rules allow, right? So I don't want you all to take this as I'm going to attack the power companies. That's not the point of the task force previous, and it won't be a point of the task force moving forward. It's going to be to understand exactly how power is paid for in Louisiana, who has that responsibility, and moving forward, do those rules work for a new Louisiana? And if not, we'll have to figure out who adjusts those. Most of those changes come from the Public Service Commission, and they have a job to do as well. So again, this isn't an attack on anybody. You're going to see an understanding. Probably the previous task force we've learned a good bit. We're going to continue the task force for the next year, figuring out if we're going to make changes. What would those changes be to benefit Louisiana? And then who's responsible for the changes? And I think, like in everything you've seen in Baton Rouge, whether it's most recently the tort reform, when you get everybody in a room together and you discuss what's possible, what can pass, and what the governor can sign, you come up with something that works. I expect to do excuse me, the exact same thing when we get to that point. I don't know whether this session is going to be at that point, just by the sure massive understanding of how all of this works. So that's kind of what my feel is for this upcoming legislative session. I'm going to do my best to make sure the congressional race is not debated on the Senate floor or in Senate committee. I'll say that again. I'm going to try my best. I'm not sure I'll be successful, but I'm going to try my best to keep the congressional debate outside the Capitol. I don't know how successful I'll be, but I think it's a good goal. And if you all write that, maybe the people running will read it and give me a little bit of latitude to kind of control the moment should they pop up. I'm good for now. If you all are okay with question and answer, I'll have the speaker come up and y'all can ask him the hard ones and give me the easy ones.
Great, thank you so much. And while he's making his way up here, I just want to, a few reminders for our guests here. The floor is going to be open to questions. Just a reminder that questions, just working members of the press and members of the Baton Rouge Press Club are able to ask questions in this venue. Please try to keep your questions somewhat to the point, so we can hear from our speakers as much as possible.
I think she's probably trying to say that if your question turns into a story, we're probably going to cut you off and ask you to land that plane so somebody else can ask a question.
Thank you so
there
much.
You go.
And for you guys, if you could please try to remember to repeat the question so to help people who are listening online.
Okay.
Thank you.
How do you want to go in a circle? You want to call people out?
I can call people for you.
That's best.
Okay.
Perfect. We don't want to pick favorites, so
Okay. Great. In the back, please.
Well, you can't pick favorites either.
So with changes made to the SNAP program from one big beautiful bill, obviously we have that flat increase coming in October, but there were eligibility requirement changes, and with that comes administrative complexity. And so are
Yes, I believe it's about a $45 million shortfall, which they need to address those the new qualifications, you may say, to address what the Big Beautiful did. So I don't think we have an option of not doing it. So I believe we'll wind up somewhere. The Speaker will figure out. But I believe it's about $45 million shortfall, which they need now. So if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do.
Are you putting any money besides that $45 million extra that's coming out to the program?
Look, I'll tell you this. In the past, we've had some conversations on the SNAP program, and the Senate President, myself, and the Governor all sat down and had conversations on making sure those that need to be taken care of are taken care of. And I would expect that we would do the same thing moving forward.
Yes or no? Do you support House Bill 204, Dixon McNaken's bill, that would have Breck and Katz submit monthly bank statements to the legislative auditor? Yes or no? Do you support that bill?
They want us to repeat the question, but I need you to repeat the question so I can repeat the question. Do we support McMaken's bill to require Breck
And Katz.
and who? Brett and Katz. Okay, the bus system. Gotcha. Okay.
To submit monthly bank statements at the end of the month to the legislative auditor.
To submit monthly bank statements to the legislative auditor. I haven't read the bill. I don't know why I would be opposed to it, but I'm not going to blankly say I'm for something that I haven't seen or only get the cliff notes from you. So if that's what's required, I don't see an issue, but I would like to read the bill, obviously, before I can give you a hard answer one way or the other.
Thank you. Please read.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's extremely difficult for us to just answer yes or no on something we haven't actually read. So I appreciate you asking the question, but I would like to read the legislation and then be able to answer your question yes or no.
Thank you.
Senator Henry, this is probably for you. There's been a lot of upheaval in the flood board, levee board in New Orleans on the East Bank. And I know you publicly said you're interested in seeing some changes there. Are you expecting legislative changes? And if so, what do you want to see done differently there?
I'm working with Senator Hilferty on this to try to figure out whether we need to expand the board or shrink the board. Obviously, they have, it's a levee board that has now become more of a police board than a levee board. And I'm not saying one is more important than the other, but the goal is to protect the levees. And then if their police force has done such a great job, maybe we can take a look at peeling them off and having a police force and a levee force, but separate to it and not overlapping on all the human resources and contracts and drama that we've had. I think we had some very unique personalities on that board from the beginning, and I believe they've kind of calmed down a good bit. And I think if they can get back to the basic order of protecting the levees, I think they have a better chance of having us mingle in them. But they've been such high-profile fights amongst the board and really against the press for whatever reason that didn't go very well for them. So we're going to work with Representative Hilferty on that and see if we actually need legislation or whether they can make some internal changes, maybe with board members, maybe with their processes. I would always prefer to allow someone to do it themselves before legislation comes in, kind of going back to the young lady's idea of having a bill to require the Breck and Cat to submit something. That should just be something they do voluntarily. And if they say no, then you would move to legislation.
On out-migration, we've had a number of graders to out-migrate to Mississippi. We've had a number of cosmetologists to outsource out to migrate out to Texas due to deregulation. How do y'all stand on Mike Baham's bill with regard to deregulating hair braiding or alternative hair, whatever you want to refer to? This will be about the 8th time that there's been an effort to do that.
That you remember? Go ahead.
Come up, the bill should be basically identical to last year's Baham bill that didn't make it.
Yeah, so the question is about deregulating hair braiding, specifically on Representative Baham's bill. I've supported that legislation through the years that it's been brought, I guess, to the House floor. Look, we certainly want to stop the outward migration of people leaving Louisiana, going to other states. We feel like the more business friendly we can be, the more we can keep people in Louisiana. So, yes, I support that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I
I've got a question about Act 1 of First Special Session of 24, the closed primary bill. But I'm not asking about the closed primary. I'm asking about what you did to restrict access to the general election ballot by independents and third-party candidates. It appears that your purpose was to limit general elections to Democrats and Republicans. Will you explain why you think it's better for Louisiana if we can only have Democrats and Republicans on the general election ballot?
Yeah, I believe we allow no parties to vote in those elections. So we didn't limit it to both Republicans and Democrats. No parties allowed to vote.
You said they can vote in the primaries, no party people. But libertarians and Greens and independents have a huge hurdle they haven't had for decades on getting into the general election. You put a petitioning requirement on there. Democrats and Republicans pay a moderate fee to get on the ballot for their primaries. But independents now have to collect a bunch of signatures. And by the way, federal courts have ruled it unconstitutional to say that nobody but non-Democrats and Republicans can sign the nominating petitions and that they have to be in by qualifying. Those provisions have been excluded by many courts around the country. So again, but I want to know, why is your purpose? Why do you think it's so good for us that no one but Democrats and Republicans can be on the general election ballot?
It's the candidates on the ballot.
Not the voters.
Oh yeah, but the candidates, not the voters.
That's right.
Okay, that's how the legislation came out. I wish you would have come to the committee and made that point to us, and maybe we would have voted differently.
So you weren't aware of that aspect of it?
Well, I mean, to answer your question, we voted for the bill because there was a huge push by the governor to have a closed primary system. That's what he wanted to do. And he stood by that. If someone brings a bill this session to adjust it, maybe we'll look at it again. I believe after the May election, or this election cycle, though you're going to see several bills next year to undo it, because I think it's going to be breathtakingly confusing to all of the voters for what we just did.
I appreciate Mr. DeVillier's concept about this.
Yeah, I mean, look, personally, I'm not really familiar with a closed primary system. I think what we were trying to reflect on is kind of what they do along the presidential elections. I'm not sure if the presidential election happens the same way that you're referring to or not, but it does not. Okay. And I mean, look, again, we do pass bills that have unintended consequences. We come back in the legislature and we can work through those issues when we go back into session. Any prayers?
Gentlemen, there is a lot of talk that I've heard about psilocybin treatment for PTSD and addiction recovery. How do you see those talks going behind the scenes? And is there any assurances from leadership that will move forward? And the second part there.
Wait, you can't do the second part when we barely can hear the first part. So, say that question a little bit slower.
Yeah, so psilocybin treatment.
Psilocybin treatment.
Psychoactive drugs for
addiction recovery and PTSD treatment. Okay.
I've heard a lot of talk about that coming from the Capitol. Are there assurances from leadership that any legislation on that will move forward?
I have never heard of anything you just said. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I can say that no one has come to me and said, excuse me, that is a priority for them. I'm anxious to. Is this like what Aaron Rodgers this is the Aaron Rodgers football player type of stuff?
Senator McNabb said he sponsored the legislation there. And
That's who it was.
Neil Reiser as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Then I correct myself. Senator McNabb has mentioned that to me, but I haven't gotten to the specifics with any of it yet. Good.
Yeah, the same Representative Reiser had spoken to me about his legislation that he was wanting to bring. I really hadn't heard a whole lot about that before, but he explained it to me quite well, I think. And I would say as the bill goes through the process, I'm anxious to learn more about it. But you're asking if we can assure that we would support it. I need to know a lot more about something that is, in my opinion, new before I can say whether I'd support it or not.
Sure, and then on carbon capture, I know a lot of bills last session were either watered down or did not make past finish lines. What do you see actually happening at the end of the session on carbon capture?
Yeah, I mean, I looked on, I think on Friday, and we had around 22 bills on the House side that was filed that were, in my opinion, anti-carbon capture. Look, I support carbon capture. It's no secret. I think it's something that we need to learn as much as we can about and make sure that it's done safely in Louisiana. I've even been to sites where they do it in Texas. and they're doing it successfully there, and they're doing it safely there. But as I mentioned earlier, for Louisiana to be a global competitor, and for the industries that are here today and the new ones that are coming in, for us to support them and to make sure that they're successful, it's something that we certainly need to keep an open ear to, and open eyes to, and just an open door policy to. But there's going to be a lot of bills coming when it comes to anti-carbon capture. And I don't know where those bills end up. I mean, it's just like any other legislation you ask me about whether it passed or not. It's something that I want to learn more on, what the authors are trying to do, and what their legislative intent is before I can say what's going to happen with those bills.
Sure. Do you support that local option?
I do not.
Thank you.
Does the governor's office or either one of you have any plans to look at the sustainability of the water in the state? In Baton Rouge, we have our Southern Hills Aquifer water, and it's used by industry also, which is it's our drinking water. So, and as these large facilities, Meta or other facilities, they will be using a lot of water. So I don't seem to have a comprehensive plan if the state's going forward, either via the governor's office or legislation to manage the water for sustainability.
I mean,
Can you please kind of summarize the question?
I think what you're asking us about is on the water aquifers and the new industries coming in. Are we looking to see how those industries coming in will affect the aquifers? Is that fair?
Correct, and if there's going to be a sustainable management plan, it's almost not piecemeal to one place here to one place there. You have agriculture, you have drinking water, you already have small towns that can't manage their water systems, so that it seems to me there needs to either be from the governor's office or either legislatively some sort of incentive to have a sustainable management plan for all the water industry.
Yes, I would agree with you, and I think we're going to have those conversations during session. I mean, the Senate President and I and the Governor, we are talking outside of session as well, and hopefully we have a good working relationship to make sure that all of those boxes are being checked. I can tell you a year plus ago when I was talking with the Meta folks at the Capitol, they were explaining to me the type of systems that they use when it comes to water. It's more of like a closed loop system, which is not what you see so much today in the older type, I guess, plants and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, I agree with him. I mean, the same, you could almost do the task force that we put together for power to figure out how it's all going to go. You could almost put something together as it relates to water and have the same thing, figure out exactly what the needs are, project out 10 years, how much water we're going to need, and see if we're capable of doing that, and if not, what adjustments we have to make. So that's not an issue like that isn't an argumentative issue. It's an understanding the process and understanding what's needed, and then finding, maybe you debate on how to fix it, but we all agree we're going to have to do something.
Right there in the green, please.
There's a bill proposed that would allow people to carry guns on campus, like public campuses like LSU, ULL, ULM. Do you all have any sort of comment that you want to make about it or support?
So I will tell you for the House side, I'm anxious to hear from the different systems, from the system. I'm sorry. So the question asked, there's a bill that's proposed to allow people to carry guns on campus. And the question is, what do we see happening with that legislation? Fair enough?
What do you see happening? What are you in favor of?
Right. So for me, again, I'm going to lean on what the system presidents are telling me, what they would like, how that could affect them, if there's any type of, I would just say gray area, so to speak, that in this situation they would, and in this other area maybe they wouldn't. The type of, if you're post-certified and things of that nature. So there's a lot of conversation I would expect and some spirited debate that I would expect to take place over that.
I know we've got a question over here.
I'm very interested in you're talking about the power companies and the fees, because that's a big issue in Baton Rouge, East Baton Rouge Parish, I'm sure it is across the state. And the question I have is, you mentioned the Louisiana Public Service Commission has certain criteria of what they can and can't do. My question is that only under their purview to make these changes, or what capabilities does the legislature have to would not possibly pass these fees on to us? Is that just already in the law where they can do that? Because we have issues with that. It's affecting our pocketbooks.
Yes, the question that the young lady is asking related to power companies and the fees that were already on the books, is that something that the legislature can address, or does it really confide within the Public Service Commission? The overwhelming majority of it is within the Public Service Commission.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, going off of that question, what are some rules that the legislature is thinking about implementing to protect citizens from the new?
Well, the issue becomes is what can we do, and that's what we're trying to figure out. What do our rules allow that is not already covered in the Constitution by the Public Service Commission? Are we going to have to get a constitutional convention on the ballot 2 or 3 years from now to kind of loosen up to where the legislature has greater control over this or not? And I think that's the part where you want to work with the Public Service Commission and the energy companies so you don't have to come to that point. But just like the young lady was saying, the majority of people don't even know exactly how your bill is derived now. And one of the things you'll learn is that if you see energy companies talking, they'll talk to you about the rate, but they don't talk to you about their bill. So next time you're interviewing someone and they talk about the rate, say, I pay the rate and I also pay the bill. Tell me about the bill, not the rate. And I think when you start looking at your entire bill, which the young lady was discussing, I think you see a lot of those are already within the Public Service Commission. But we're going to work through, I think Senator Henskins has a bill that he might address a little bit of that if we can. But again, we're still learning this process. Really, we're still learning how the power bill is derived and all the add-ons that they can have. We're still beginning that and see who controls it. So it's not going to go away. I started this task force last year because I saw what was coming as it relates to what happens in other states. And it won't be a one-year fix. And again, we'd like to do it collectively, not as a you must do that everybody sits around and understands what the new rules maybe have to be. She's in charge of calling people.
Okay. We'll go with you first.
Okay, one thing that I heard a lot about today is the availability of health care, particularly in rural areas. You have areas, particularly north of I-10, where you may have to go 40, 60, maybe even 100 miles just to get health care. Is there any initiative that you'll be looking at as far as to improve that?
Yeah, the question is there any legislation to help address the needs in rural health care? Fair enough. So I can tell you, working with the Louisiana Department of Health and Bruce, there's a program that they're pushing right now that's pretty well funded from the federal side to try to aid in the situation that we have with access to care when it comes to rural health care. So we're leaning on the Department of Health and working with our rural providers to try to make sure that we can accomplish that.
Go ahead.
The governor has recently said that he wants to reduce the income tax down to 0%. President Henry mentioned maybe reducing the income tax 0.5% this coming year. What's going to be done as far as revenue source to replace that loss of income, or are we going to streamline government to reduce the cost of government?
So when I mentioned the lowering sales tax, that we would be able to do that in next legislative session, not this year, it would be for next year. And I think that's why you're going to try to see a standstill budget, so the growth, where our economy is growing, we're capturing those dollars and using reoccurring revenue for one-time expenses so that we can kind of store up and have enough to where if we lower income tax, we'll be able to afford it. We're not going to do it to the detriment of state government, of the services. We're going to do it in an obviously very responsible manner. But I do think between the continued streamlining of government and the growth of all the successes, the $1 billion+ that are coming to Louisiana, we should be able to find the money by this time next year to be able to do that.
Well, government has increased by 600 people this past year. So what are we going to do about streamlining government if government is increasing?
Go ahead. I was actually going to speak back on because there's a lot of conversation about lowering income taxes. I'd like to speak a little bit on that first. And I think Jan spoke last week a little bit about what he sees going forward for our economy. But look, in a little over a year ago, last November, we had a tax reform special session. And again, I mentioned earlier that we lowered income taxes, both personal and corporate. We're getting rid of franchise tax, and we have a path to get rid of the inventory tax. What we don't know yet is we haven't gone through a complete cycle of filing. So right now, people are filing their personal income taxes, and I would say moving into June, July, August, you'll start seeing the corporations filing for theirs. We need to see a full cycle of collections before we can make a decision on what we're going to do on the income tax side moving forward. And I'll tell you, if you look at the One Big Beautiful Bill and you read articles on that, states across the nation are seeing a huge reduction in collections on the corporate income tax side alone. Last time I checked, which was last week, the state collected around $300 million on the corporate income tax in itself. That's something that we really need to be paying very close attention to moving forward before we have a real conversation about what's the plan on reducing income taxes moving forward. And I don't know what you're talking about adding 600 people, sir, but I can promise you Jack McFarland on the House side and Glenn Womack on the Senate side, they've been in meetings already with all of the agencies, making sure that we're doing what we can to hold back on any agency growth. And I know the governor had a LaDoge type group that I think they just recently wrapped up on, and we saw some really positive wins in that. But it's something we're going to continue to build on and work together between the House and the Senate to limit the growth of government.
I want to try to get in two more questions, so we'll go here and then we'll go to you. Go ahead.
This question's directed towards Senator Henry, but I want to hear, what is your opinion on having a local option for the carbon capture project and local opinions and things on that?
Well, I mean, I haven't supported. I don't think a local option bill has gotten to the Senate. It hasn't gotten to the Senate yet. At this stage, I'm not in support of it because I think when you're talking about an industry that's going to come in and change not only a parish but could possibly change the face of Louisiana, I think having a group of 5 people go in and say, under no circumstances will I ever allow this here, that's not practical. I mean, I use this line all the time, and everybody in Louisiana supports change. They just don't want anything to be different, right? And that's a snapshot of what that group would want. They want something that we've got to change this. I need more industry here. Great. Well, then something has to be different than what you were doing last year or the year before. And if you don't support the difference part, then don't ask for the change, because you have to have both. And one thing that this governor appreciates is both of those things. He wants things to change, and he knows they're going to have to be different, which is why he is, full bore for the first 2 years. And this year, he's really stepped back and said, I'm going to have kind of a member-driven session instead of administrative-driven session, which I think is going to be good for everyone.
I'm glad you asked that question, because it was asked earlier directly to me, and I just said no. But the reality is we were also issued guidance from the Supreme Court that says states nor local governments should interfere with interstate commerce. I mean, that is exactly what local option is. So even with the Supreme Court's guidance, that's something we need to certainly adhere to. Thank you.
All right, and one final quick question.
Okay, I wanted to follow up with Senator Henry.
He's here too.
I wanted to go back to so Meta and Amazon are 2 of the richest companies in the world. So what you're saying, I know you're still at early stages, but Louisiana consumers are going to be paying part of the cost of their data center power infrastructure plus a 10% profit for the utilities. That's how it works right now.
I don't know what percentage the consumers, both residential and commercial consumers, will be paying for Meta or Amazon. We don't know that exact dollar amount. It would be an interesting question to ask to the power companies. I would recommend you do that, and they can get up to a 10% return on that investment. They don't call it a return; they call it something else. But at the end of the day, it's a return. Those folks. I don't know what that is now. I know that's what the options are on the table. And if they abide by those rules, which were given to them by the Public Service Commission, you can't fault them for that, but I think it's time for all of us to understand kind of a greater depth of what that means for our pocketbooks and attracting other businesses here as well.
Okay, but Meta and Amazon will be the same structure as any other company coming to Louisiana, just like, for all the billions.
When you say the same structure, what do you mean?
Of the rates and the power companies, and they're not paying a higher, Meta and Amazon aren't paying a higher share of their
I don't know exactly what part of the power they're paying. That's kind of the point of the task force, was to break it all out and figure who's responsible for what and for how long. Is it for 15 years or is it for 30 years? A data center's lifespan is about 15 years. So if we're going to be on the hook 15 years from now because someone else is paying it now, then what do you do with that site that is 5 miles long and 2 miles wide? So we're still working through that.
That's about it. Did you want to add anything?
Thank you.
Okay, that's all the time
Thank you.
we have. Thank you so much.